Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray of the EAFC video game and the Bundesliga. You're listening to the SFF Podcast World Cup Special, the home of World Cup 26 banter.
"43 days to go until Scotland's long-awaited return to the World Cup kicks off at the Gillette Foxborough Stadium, Boston, against Haiti. The anticipation is building ahead of the big event, as are the credit card bills and loan repayments to Tartan Army need to fund the trip." I'm John, and we have another World Cup special as we look into the media side of things. Joining me is a man so well known in the media circles that he's in the top 5 of the off-the-ball speed dial list, and pals with James McFadden. Stephen Reeside, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. Thanks for having us.
I thought I'd improve in the last one that we did, although you came in quite late in the last thing that we done. So
No, you always get me good. So I was anticipating it. I'm glad you had the confidence not to run it by me this time. So feel free, It's all banter.
There was nothing risky this time. We do have a special guest tonight, and it's a man who will be following in the footsteps of Arthur Montford, Archie McPherson, Jock and Rob MacLean by commentating on the men's national team at the World Cup finals. Welcome along, BBC Scotland commentator Liam McLeod. How are you doing, Liam?
Gentlemen, thank you very much for the invite. It's not often I get invited to stuff, so I'm always delighted when it happens. You know, it makes me feel special, which I'm clearly not.
Well, I wasn't sure if we were going to get you because you're BBC's number one commentator at the moment, so you're obviously a sought after man.
I wouldn't go that far, you know, and that's taking it to silly levels now, John. You know, but yeah, I mean, it's been quite the journey, to be fair, and you know, what's coming up over the horizon. The reason we're doing this is something that you know is kind of beyond expectation levels, because I think we'd gone so long without this kind of thing happening up until about 5 or 6 years ago that we just assumed that it wasn't going to happen again. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful to, you know, as a Scotland fan first and foremost, to be in a position that we can support a terrific and special group of players at a major finals again, you know, and it is special. And I think, you know, when you consider how long it was between tournaments and how many generations, it must be 2 generations. I don't know, what is a generation? Nobody seems to know. But, you know, at least one generation has not known regular tournament qualifications. So you've got to enjoy it while they come, and enjoy them while they're here, because you just never know when, you know, the gravy train's going to stop.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm 32, Liam, and I can't remember one, so there you go.
Yeah, that's my point. That's exactly my point, Stephen. You know what I mean? It's anyone who is probably under the age of 40 is probably in the same bracket, I would say. You know, and you may be even looking above 40 now, because when Scotland qualified for 98, and we went so long between major tournaments after that one in France, I was 18 at the time. You know, so you know you're at a point here where it's really special that we should embrace the fact that we've got a group of players that are capable of qualifying for these tournaments.
Yes. So Stephen was obviously. Were you barely out of nursery getting into primary school at that time?
Yeah.
So, but just as Stephen, Scotland did used to qualify regularly. So Liam, you can back us up by discussing your early memories of following the national team. What were they like?
They were good. I mean, they were really good. I remember growing up and being obsessed by listening to Scotland games on the radio primarily, because they weren't all live in the telly. I think you got the odd one, but I seem to remember listening to the radio in the evening and staying up to watch the highlights in the evening. That's kind of my abiding memory of Scotland in the kind of late 80s, early 90s, and sitting up watching it with my dad or whatever in the evening, like after 10 or whatever. So you got to stay up late even though you were going to school in the morning, if Scotland were playing, it was an event, and it still is to this day. But, there's a lot of contention about where the live TV rights should be or where they are these days. But, you didn't always have them. You weren't always able to watch Scotland play, to listen on the radio. And radio coverage and commentary back in those days was amazing, because when Scotland were away from home, it was almost like they were commentating down a telephone line. So it was just kind of real fuzzy sort of, static you would hear in amongst whoever was commentating on the game. And you knew they were in a far-flung venue, whether it was Sofia in Bulgaria or Bucharest in Romania. You had this fantastic experience of listening to a football match on this crackly line for 2 hours, and you were just mesmerised by it. And then after that, you would sit down and watch the highlights in the evening. And, generally speaking, back in those days, in the kind of late 80s into the early 90s, as I said, you were generally watching a Scotland team that qualified for tournaments and would get big results away from home, and as Willie Miller always says to me, if Scotland teams can win their home games and get the odd result, even if it's a draw on the road, they've got every chance of qualifying for tournaments. For years, we struggled against smaller nations, even at home, which is why we didn't make competitions, tournament outrights. Whereas now, we're back to where we were in those days that I'm harking back to, and that they can, win their home games and they can get the odd result on the road. But it was just a great experience. I probably, when I think back to those Scotland games in my early days, I'm probably talking about the qualifying campaign to get to Italy. Before that, there are the odd thing sticks out. Strachan in Mexico with a leg on the advertising board and all that kind of stuff. I remember those kind of things. But, the Ireland games to qualify for Euro 88, which we lost, and it ultimately ended up qualifying the Republic of Ireland by virtue of one of our results. But no, it was probably from the qualifiers to get to Italy onwards that I took a real kind of passionate interest in it, and just great memories, particularly that Norway game, the game at Hampden when we qualified for the World Cup in 1990. Mm-hmm. That night was, and I'm sure that wasn't live on the telly from memory. I could be wrong. It's a long time ago, guys. Do you know what I mean?
I couldn't handle that. I couldn't handle it.
Yeah, I mean that was that game. That game was remembered for a few things. It was remembered for a very important Ali McCoist goal, and I remember it being a draw. And turning to my dad, saying, "Is that enough? Is a draw good enough here?" Because it disappointed initially that we hadn't won the match, but a draw was enough to qualify us for the tournament. And as a kind of side note to that, that was the match that ended Willie Miller's career as well, which is, for me being an Aberdonian, that's kind of an emotional game when you look back at it now. I grew up watching Willie in his kind of latter stages of his career, but that was the actual game that finished it for him, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, great memories from back in those days, qualifying for tournaments, whether it was Italy, Sweden, or France, England. It was just great.
Yeah. I think back then, even up until France 98, most live games would have been it was one home game a campaign and maybe a couple of away games. So that changed in 98 when Sky came in. So we can blame Sky for Scotland not qualifying for a while. I said that to Crocker once upon a time. But what was the first kit? Do you remember the first kit that you had?
It was the Italy one. The one they wore that in the qualifiers as well for that tournament. That was the first Scotland shirt that I had. Yeah, and for me personally, I went alongside the JVC top that Aberdeen had, and those were the two. I didn't have them off my back, I don't think, for about 3 years.
Great days, Liam.
Yes, they weren't the best quality because the old motif and things like that, after a couple of washes, it kind of washed out a bit. But the good thing about that kit, and they didn't always do this, but that kit came in, I think, with standard red socks. I think Scotland's home kit should always have the red socks.
I agree.
That's just my opinion. I think they've kind of flirted with it occasionally recently, but I just think it, that. But again, it's always a case that no matter, you're talking about football kits or whatever, it's all, if you're talking about football kits or your favourite James Bond, it's generally the first one you had. And for me, the Scotland strip was with red socks, white shorts, navy top, and it had the white collar. It was magnificent. And the first Bond I ever saw was Roger Moore, just in case you were interested in that. Is he my favourite Bond? Yeah, it's subjective.
That's it. It's all about opinions at the end of the day. But obviously, from 90 onwards, we've had some interesting designs in terms of the kits. What's been your favourite and least favourite tops over these years? Because there's been a few in both sets.
Well, they said the first one was my favourite. They've not beaten that one. They've not beaten that one. Not once have they managed to surpass that. They had a recent. Was it the anniversary top they had recently? Yeah. What was that? That was the SFA's anniversary, wasn't it?
150, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was tremendous. I think they only wore it in 2 matches, which was bitterly disappointing. And see if they'd worn that one at the Euros in Germany. I'm not saying the results would have been any better, but they would have looked better.
Why did they?
I don't know. It was to me. I think I had red socks in that as well, didn't it? Absolute classic. Like, I'm not, generally speaking, guys, I'm not into fit by strips and how they look and how I look in them. The only time I ever wear a football related top these days is if I'm going out for a run. I don't wear them. I'm too old for a start. But I'll wear one if I'm going out for a run or something like that. But yeah, the worst one. I mean, there's been a couple of dreadful ones down the years, isn't there? I mean, there was a pinstripe. Well, there was one really bad one they wore with a kind of wee white triangle on the neck. Might have been run about 99, 2000, 2001, something like that. 2002 maybe. I tried that. I'm not brilliant
with these. Was it the Diodora one? Where
Diodora it was. It was. And it had was it Faddy scored against the Dutch? Is that what you're about to say, John?
Yeah.
I think so. That wasn't a great one. But when you're talking about kits generally, you can't really get the home top dreadfully wrong. But the away ones, they had a pinstripe salmon thing back in the mid-90s with purple in it, and it was diabolical. I mean, I understand they try and go back to the salmon colours, and they've done it again recently to much greater effect, I have to say. But there was one in the mid-90s with a big thick pinstripes in it, purple.
Yeah.
It was horrific. And the one they beat Germany in Bremen in a friendly with Don Hutchison's goal, that wasn't a great kit either. And there was a couple of white and purple things in the 90s as well, which weren't great. They've always been better with the home kits, to be fair. And when it comes to away kits, if you're really getting me on about this, again, it goes back to that Italia 90 era. That was a magnificent away kit with the white, navy and yellow. I mean, just brilliant. Again, I had the Scotland home kit and I had the Scotland away kit in those days. And they were both, I mean, I probably wear them now. I don't wear football kits, as I said, out with running, but I probably put one of them on now. Classics.
They are. I've got the 2 ones for now because I think that's the best home and away combination since Italia 90. That's just a personal opinion again.
You'll look better in them than me, John, to be fair.
I wouldn't know. But thanks for saying that you feel you're 2 olds and I'm a year younger than you.
That's a good point. Hey, listen, whatever lights your candles, John, that's all I'm saying.
So go back to so Italia 90 was my first World Cup as well. So obviously some great memories of the whole tournament, not necessarily Scotland because it's dominated mainly by Costa Rica, and then the Brazil game's a tale of 2 goalkeepers. Jim Lake makes the mistake and then Taffarel makes one of the best saves ever from Mo Johnson, and then obviously France 98, the opening game against Brazil, etc. What's your memories of those tournaments?
The one in Italy, the biggest memory I've got is the Costa Rica game because I came back from school to watch it. I think it was like a 5 p.m. kickoff or something. I don't know that for a fact. I could be completely wrong, but the sun was out in Genoa So it must have been a kind of early evening game. And everyone, even me as an 11-year-old, 10, 11-year-old, I was fully expecting a Scotland victory. However, I'd gone to my first Scotland game just before that tournament, and it was at Pittodrie, and Scotland played Egypt, and were beaten 3-1, I think. McCoy scored the Scotland goal, but they were well beaten on the day. So that was a word of warning. You know, even though they'd beaten Argentina, actually, in a friendly, who were the reigning holders, obviously, from 86. And they'd beaten them at Hampden just before that Egypt game, a few months. I think the Argentina game might have been in March. Egypt was at the end of the club season.
Yeah.
Something like that anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
Yeah, it was. So going into the tournament, you'd seen them beat Argentina and lose to Egypt. And I went with Argentina in my head thinking, beat Argentina, be fine. Lose to Egypt, doesn't matter. The Costa Rica game, Kayasu and all that. And I was particularly disappointed because my favourite footballer in those days was Jim Bett, who should have been capped more often than he was, given his talent. But he was given a start against Costa Rica from memory. John will correct me if I'm wrong. Sure, Bett started the game, and he might not have started another Scotland game after that, but he was magnificent as you know, as a midfield player, creative, spotted passes that I didn't see any other footballer producing at that time. So I remember being delighted Bett was playing, and I can't lose to Jim Betts in the team. That can't happen. And of course they lose the Kayasu goal, and typical Scotland, they're on the back foot immediately, which, you know, A, not for the first time, and B, not for the last time. But I remember Stuart McCall poking the ball home against Sweden in Genoa as well. I was in Genoa a few years ago, and I wanted to see the stadium. So I emailed Genoa and Sampdoria to see if one of them would let me in, just to have a wee wander about and all that. Nobody got back to me, unfortunately, but I still went to the stadium. And there's this, Genoa's built basically on a mountainside. So it goes up and then comes back down again, but it's primarily on the side of the mountain. So you're a lot of climbing in Genoa. So I can only imagine the state of the TA walking about in the kilts.
Not wheelchair accessible either. No wheelchair accessible.
I wouldn't suggest Genoa is the best place to go to in that kind of situation, Stephen, to be fair. But they've got this, if you're able to do it, and obviously it's easier for some than it is for others, you can, if you get up to the peak, you can look down at Luigi Ferrari Stadium, and it's a sight to behold, because you've got those, you know, the big, what would you call them, John? You know, the big kind of turrets in the four corners. And I took a walk down this massive staircase. And as I walked down it, I was kind of just imagining what it must have been like, you know, being a foot soldier, going to that opening match against Genoa and then the Sweden game as well. And what the atmosphere must have been like, and everything that went with it. A World Cup or any major tournament in Italy. Italy's, I don't know, you know, if people haven't been to Italy, it's just one of the best places you can go and visit. It doesn't matter where you go in Italy. It's a magnificent country. I can only imagine how good it must have been for the Scotland supporters to go to Italy, go to that World Cup finals and soak all of that up. So I had a look at the stadium and still never been in it to this day. I actually text Packy Bonner when I was there outside it, sent him a picture of it because he's still dining off that save against Romania, which was in the same stadium. And they apparently in the knockouts of the tournament, I don't remember much about the knockouts that tournament. I'm only joking. You know, that was obviously a great moment for the big man, a great moment for Ireland. But that, you know, that my memories, John, of Italy are obviously those Scotland games, obviously late, as we call them. I said an absolute nightmare against Brazil, but he's a world-class keeper and a world-class guy, in my opinion. But as you say, I mean, Taffarel made an outstanding save from Maurice Johnston. But the win against Sweden stands out because of the Stuart McCall goal that ultimately, won the match. Arthur McLeod getting smacked in the pus by Branko's free kick. Again, it's something I worked with Murdo for years, and it was something that I spoke to him about. He doesn't remember anything about it, understandably. But no, Italy was, head and shoulders for me is the World Cup. France was different because obviously I was 18 at the time. John Collins converting a penalty led me to lose a 4-pint pitcher in the Student Union in Aberdeen. And watching that game, it was wonderful, but the roller coaster. I mean, as a Scotland supporter, I would say if someone said, what game could you handpick where you can say that you've experienced every single emotion as a Scotland supporter, that would be the one, the Brazil game that opened the tournament in 98. Because obviously we go 1-0 down. The penalties awarded. Gordon Jury went down, wasn't it?
Gallagher.
Oh, was it? I thought it was Jury.
Kevin Gallagher, was it? Right, I thought it was Jury as well. Right, so Kevin Gallagher wins the penalty and Johnny Collins sticks it away. And there's this brilliant slow motion replay from behind the goal of Collins. He's kind of puffing out his cheeks as soon as the ball hits the net, and then he runs away at the corner, like Paul Lambert and all that behind him. And just an incredible moment for me as well, being in a student union in Aberdeen. With my mates. The same mates. I mean, there were guys from college who had met like less than a year before, and we were in there watching this game in the big screen. The place was absolutely rammed, and it was like an afternoon kickoff. It was 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, something like that. It was like we were in there for a good few hours before. We'd completed all lessons beforehand. Don't worry, I wasn't skiving, but we were in there. And just wonderful. I remember having a pretty tremendous night out in Amadeus nightclub in Aberdeen after that. May it rest in peace, Amadeus, what a place that was. But what a great thing for Scotland to open a World Cup finals in France against the reigning holders. And we're just going to meet Brazil at every single World Cup we ever qualify for again. I think that's the way it's going to go. But just great. I was back in that student union for the Morocco game, but less said about that, the better, I would suggest.
Yeah, let's not remind ourselves of a bad hangover. And a tip, if you want to get into the Luigi Ferraris Stadium, maybe get in touch with Liam Henderson, who plays for Sampdoria. He might let you in, or know somebody. In fairness,
Liam Henderson was not playing for Sampdoria when I was there, John, but I absolutely take your point.
Yeah, it might be helpful going forward. So obviously this takes you up to your, to the time where you're starting to look to get into journalism and media. At what point did you fancy becoming a commentator, and who were your inspirations around about that time?
I hadn't thought about being a commentator at all until probably I must have been about 25, something like that. It wasn't an ambition of mine as a kid or anything like that. I didn't really want to be in football. I mean, I loved football, loved watching it, loved kicking the ball about. I was never a good enough player. But it was one of these things. I wanted to work in broadcasting. That was a passion of mine. Presenting is what I wanted to do. I used to sit there as a kid watching like Chris Evans, Noel Edmonds, these guys, geniuses of live TV, guys who could handle prime time BBC, ITV Channel 4 live TV programs with millions of people watching them. Every mistake they would be seen, all that, and the way they handled it. I mean, generally, if they made mistakes, they could cover it up because they're geniuses when it comes to presenting. I also loved radio, loved listening to radio, local radio, Didn't really listen to much like Radio 1 and stuff. It was all kind of local, like North Sound, which is where I'm from. All that kind of stuff. So I wanted to present TV. I had a real passion, or radio. I had a real passion for broadcasting. Loved it. A lot of my mates, or pretty much all my mates, kind of took the piss out of that a wee bit, because they're all tradesmen, or they were riggers, working offshore, real jobs, if you like. These guys, this is what they were always going to do. And I had this thing about working in the media, and nobody could understand that. It's just, you're living a real world here, my man, that kind of thing. So, I had a couple of bites at it. Things weren't working. I moved to Edinburgh. In fact, the day after Don Hutchison scored the winner at Wembley in the Euro 2000 playoff, obviously Scotland failed to qualify. But I went down to Edinburgh and I spoke to the sports editor at Scott FM, who were a Central Belt radio station based in Leith. And their sports editor was none other than Andrew Cotter, who people will know from Wimbledon or the Olympics or the Six Nations or whatever. Fabulous broadcaster with a voice that I wish I had. This brilliant kind of Central Lowland Scottish drawl that he has. It's amazing. I've got this voice northeast of Scotland. I can't do nothing about it now, to be fair. But I met him, and he kind of paved the way for me to get into sport. Because maybe I should have thought about that, back in the day, because football was a passion of mine. I enjoyed other sports as well. I loved sitting down watching snooker, loved watching the Olympics. I loved sports generally. I used to watch rugby union back in those days a lot, watching the Five Nations and the World Cup. Loved it. So maybe I should have been looking at sport, but for me, it was all about TFI Friday and Noel's House Party and Top of the Pops, all this kind of stuff, whatever. MTV, used to watch MTV all the time, that kind of thing, But I met Cotter, and he moved down to London not long after that. I moved to Edinburgh, spoke to his successors, did a season with them, just doing post-match interviews. So this would have been season 2000, 2001. So Alec McLeish was at Hibs. They finished third. O'Neill won the treble in his first season at Celtic. Advocat was still at Rangers. It was a real eye-opener for me doing that. And I ran out of money to move back to Aberdeen. Fell out of it for a few years after doing a wee bit with North Sound. Did a live radio broadcast for Clyde, which was a disaster, to the point that they didn't want me and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it again. So I was out of it for years, and then managed to work my way back in, because there was this, you might remember, you won't remember it, Stephen, but John will remember a programme called Afternoon Sports Scene, which was on a Saturday lunchtime.
Yep.
And one day they had a competition for places on a commentary course, which was going to be held at Ibrox in conjunction with the RNIB and the Rex Blind parties, which, was and still is a fantastic organisation that looks after blind and partially sighted people at football matches, where they can get audio descriptive commentary. There are a lot of people out there doing a lot of good work, whether they're with the Rex Blind parties or with, on their own, independently. There are people doing fabulous work in accommodating people who have got that disability. And I was kind of seduced by that, because I thought you'd be doing a good thing, but also it's media, could lead to media, that kind of thing. So did that, went into a course, won a place on the course, and got to send in a dummy commentary of Scotland winning the World Cup against England in the final or something. And I was one of 30 people who won a place on this course, which was held at Ibrox. And I went down from Aberdeen to Glasgow, did this course at Ibrox. And at the end of the course, and the BBC were represented, the Rex Blind parties were represented, David Tanner Sr., who's David Tanner's father, he was a commentator, the legendary Alistair Alexander, who was a Sports Sound Radio Scotland commentator at the time, had done TV as well. He used to do stuff for the Rex Blind parties. And I did this day course, paid for my travel lodge or whatever it was to stay the overnight in Glasgow. You know, I went all in here. And everyone, 30 of us, at the end of the day, one of us had the opportunity to win a place on Sports Sound for one weekend where you could do an online commentary on a game for Sports Sounds. You know, it was a big thing. And so they put you in a horseshoe and they put a Scotland game on in the middle, volume down, and you all get 2 minutes each. One after the other, 30 of us had to commentate in 2 minutes with no atlas or nothing. And I think from memory, it was either Scotland, Canada or Scotland, Trinidad and Tobago. It was one of these games at Easter Road and read about Craig Gordon's debut. It might even have been the day Craig Gordon made his debut. Anyway, they stuck this on a VHS on and you had to do 2 minutes each, all that kind of thing. And I finished second that day. And it was just a great experience. The guy who won it got a chance to commentate on Sports Sound, and Alec, or Sandy, as he was known as, worked for kind of Hospital Radio in Falkirk. He's no longer with us, sadly. I got a lovely message from his son on LinkedIn, and I don't generally use any social media sites, but it just happened to get an email through, and his son had emailed to say he'd passed away, but you know, he'd talked about me and the fact we'd done this course, and you know, great memories for me personally. And you know, Alec was a fabulous guy, big Falkirk fan, and so did this. And to cut a long story short, I kept in touch with a couple of the BBC producers and Alistair Alexander. There was another course. I moved to Glasgow. There was another course at East End Park in Dunfermline. Did that. Got to know another couple of BBC guys. Got a phone call from one of them halfway through my uni course. It's a mature student. I was there when I was 24, 25, whatever. Saying, do you fancy your Sports Sound debut? This is after having been out, done a couple of dummy commentaries and all this kind of stuff. I hadn't even crossed my mind 2 years before this to do football commentary. And yet here I was, getting the chance to go into Radio Scotland and do this. And sure enough, I did Livingston against Falkirk, August 2005, which was my first commentary for Sports Sound. So again, that's a long story, but I've tried to condense it as quickly as I can. But that's kind of how I got into it, from not wanting or thinking about doing football commentary to ending up doing it to where I am now is kind of pretty crazy, you know?
Obviously, Liam, you mentioned that you start in August 2005, but you become BBC Scotland's main commentator in 2010. Do you remember being told that you were getting it and going to become the main commentator, and how did that moment feel?
Well, firstly, the 2010 thing is TV. And when I was told, I was kind of pulled into a room, and when I was told that I was going to be doing it, just before I went in there, I thought, oh, this is them, because I think I'd done a year, maybe 2 years of highlights commentaries. Because when I said earlier that I hadn't thought about doing commentary, I ended up doing radio commentary for a blind audience, audio descriptive commentary. I hadn't thought about doing TV, but because they needed commentators when Sports Scene got the highlights again in the kind of late 2000s, I got the opportunity to do a few of those. I then got pulled into a room, and as I was walking to the room, I thought, they're going to get rid of me now. This is them doing their thing. They're taking me aside to tell me that thank you, but we're going to take things in a different direction, that kind of thing. So no, I mean, at that point, I'd only done one live TV game, which was an amazing game for me personally to do, which was Aberdeen at Atletico Madrid in 2007, which is frighteningly coming up to 20 years ago. And so that was the only live TV game I'd done. And that night, I was just a bag of nerves, like properly a bag of nerves. And rightly so, having listened back to it. I hadn't done any TV at the time, so, for me, somebody who did audio descriptive commentary, which is a very different audience to a TV audience that doesn't need the constant updating about where the ball is and, what it's gone out for and, this kind of thing. To go to do telly I still find it quite challenging to flip between the two. But when I was told that, Stephen, it was beyond belief that I was going to be doing that, because, we're not at 2010. At that point, it's 5 years after I'd done my first ever live commentary, to then be in that position at the age of, as I was when I was told that, at the age of 30, to be 30 and be the live, kind of lead live football commentator on TV, and with great rights back then, because with the Scotland away games, we had the League Cup and we had the Scottish Cup. So we had a load of TV rights in those days, to get my teeth into and stuff. But yeah, I was very surprised when it happened. But obviously, it's, you can't say no to that. You're not going to say no to that.
No. Well, I bet your mates who were laughing at you for getting into media weren't they laughing at that point?
No, they've moved. Yeah, no, they've moved from critiquing my career choice to critiquing my commentaries and my broadcasting abilities. Don't worry about it. They've just continued. It's a plateau all the way through. Don't worry.
They've just moved the needle. Anyway, so
exactly.
What are your recollections of your first game as lead commentator? Was it Sweden away in August 2010, or was it Lithuania?
Lithuania. Yeah, Lithuania. So I'd done that game in Madrid 3 years before, and that game in Kaunas, that's one of the games that stands out to me for obvious reasons. First Scotland game live on the TV. I'd only done my first ever Scotland game, all told, the year before.
How did that feel? Was obviously being a fan, Liam, sorry to butt in, but obviously growing up, following the country, to be able to do that for the nation.
Humbling experience. Massively humbling. I went to as many Scotland games as I could. When I lived in Aberdeen as a kid, it was more difficult. But when I got older, me and a lot of the boys would go down to Hampden and what have you. Big TA at the time. And then I guess it's a kind of occupational hazard. I loved following Scotland and the Dons. Let's be honest. I'm from Aberdeen. That's one of these things. I think everyone knows where that lies for me. But we went to all the games, and it was just, the day trips are amazing. And the thing about the job that I do, Stephen, is that it's an occupational hazard in the respect that I kind of lost a hobby, if you like, because that was a kind of social outlet for me. So not only did I move away from the vast majority of my friends back home, I was also working at maybe matches that they weren't even at. Do you know what I mean? Involving teams that they don't support. But for me personally, when I was given the shout to do that the first radio game I did was Wales, which was George Burley's last game, as it turned out.
Yep.
And it was a dreadful night. Aaron Ramsey was incredible.
Yeah, please don't talk about it, please.
I know. So it's still fresh in my mind as well. Don't worry. But the Lithuania match, I was there with John Robertson, who is someone who always used to score goals against my team back when I was a kid and what have you. But he's an infectious character, Robbo. I love him to bits. He's a great guy. And did that game with him. It was 0-0. It was dreadful. The stadium was dreadful. Scotland fans were great, obviously. Kaunas was out. It was great to visit Kaunas, a great city. It was cheap. It was a fantastic experience. But yeah, as I said, Stephen, it was totally humbling. I mean, I didn't come from a background where this kind of job is natural to me, or anyone in my family or anyone that I know. It was just a really kind of great experience to be there, and whether I necessarily felt it was the right time for me to be doing that or not, to be doing it itself was an extremely proud moment.
Euro 2008 is the closest I can remember this qualifying before we actually done it. How do you recall that pain, despite the heartache and the poor refereeing decisions that cost us at the end?
Yes, is it Senior Fernandez? Can't remember his name now. Yeah. Well,
he did allow us a goal that was offside from Barry Ferguson, to be fair, just to balance that a wee bit.
Stop balancing things like that out, Bleasdale. Come on. What's all that about? Yeah, and I seem to remember that referee being invited to Rino Gattuso's sister-in-law's dad's restaurant that night after that game as well, which caused a bit of tabloid-ese the next day. But yeah, I mean, obviously that campaign stands out massively for me. It wasn't the last campaign I went to without work commitments with Scotland, but it was one of them. And I know what you're saying, Stephen. We came very close. There's no doubt we came very close. The other time we came very close was probably, and I mentioned it earlier, was the Euro 2000 playoff with Hutchison scoring. And had it not been for a ridiculous David Seaman save from Christian Daly, that's going to extra time. And I still see that save in my head, And obviously David Seaman. Yeah, and Scotland probably win the match, or win the tie after extra time, because they absolutely hammered England that night.
Tony Adams admitted that.
Yeah, and Kevin Keegan, I think, admitted it afterwards as well. I mean, this is the bottom line. But the 2008 campaign was fabulous. I remember being at the first match of that qualifying campaign, and it was at Celtic Park. They beat the Faroes, hammered the Faroes. I think Boydie scored a couple of goals. It was just a dream campaign. It seemed like it went on for about 5 years as well, from memory. Like, it went on for ages. Was there 7 teams in the group, or was it 7 or 8 teams in the group?
It was 7, because we played 12
7
qualifiers.
So I remember when the draw was made, I was working for the BBC at this point, or I was maybe at STV at the time. I can't remember exactly, but it was round about the time I started at the BBC. When the draw was made for those qualifiers, I was dispatched to Hampden, which is where the manager and the assistant manager, at the time it was Walter Smith and Archie Knox. And obviously Walter had Tommy Burns and Ali McLeod working with him as well, but for whatever reason, Archie was there. So this must have been late 2005, early 2006, something like that. So I can't remember, was it BBC STV? Anyway, I was there. And I remember going up to it was late 2006, because it was after the World Cup. I went up to Walter Smith to do an interview with him after the draw. Everyone got a little stab at him. And I'd said to him, you must be delighted. And by the way, this is after they've drawn France and Italy, who were the 2 World Cup finalists, and Ukraine, who made the quarters. I said to him, you must be absolutely delighted Zidane's retired, eh? He says to me, in the only way he could, he said to me, aye, but what about Henry and Trezeguet and Ribéry and Thuram? And he just started listing the entire French squad that was still there. I was like, yeah, that's a good point, actually. Aye, yeah, fair enough. But, I was kind of trying to hang in the positives a wee bit there. But the fact that was a dreadful draw. That was horrendous. But the fist they made of that was stunning, both under Smith and then under Big Alec, who came in, kind of midway. And I was in Paris. I bought a ticket for the home end, and me and my ex-missus with tickets for the home end. And I remember I booked train tickets on, I think it was Rio Radio. They were sponsoring a train that was taking people from Glasgow Central to Gare du Nord in Paris via Waterloo or whatever on the Eurostar. And the night started at the Classic Grand. And there was a wee party in there before the train. It was an overnight train. And went into this party, and there was a kind of raffle type thing was going on. And Kat Harvey was hosting it.
Yeah.
And I've told Kat this story several times after a few pints and trips, that I'd entered this raffle and got tickets for the away end. Went up and got them, claimed them, got on the train, went to Paris, and went the trip, sold my home end tickets to a couple of boys who I knew, Scotland fans, and went to the game. And I remember turning around whenever James McFadden hit that shot. See, when James Henry McFadden hit that shot, round about that time, I turned round and started speaking to someone behind me, in the row behind me. And I turned back round seconds later because everyone was reacting. And I just saw this ball nestling in the top corner of the net. And it was just incredible. Those two France games, we were battered in both games.
Oh, hi. Oh, yeah.
Both games. The one at Hampden, battered. I think Henry hit the bar. The game in Paris, it was just constant battering, like honestly. But it's just the abiding memory of that campaign for me was walking out the Parc des Princes that night, and the France fans were all out applauding the Tartan Army as they left the stadium. Do you know what I mean? It was just amazing. And at that point, all we've really got to do is beat Georgia.
Aye, and we know what happens there. But you mentioned earlier that the Brazil game in '98 was a game that you went through all the emotions that you could go through. And Stephen, I cried that night, and I cannot say that I've cried terribly often in my life. What night is that? Is that the night against Brazil?
That was the Brazil night. Yeah. That game, when they lost the game and the Tomboy Doji was in, like that was, in football terms, that was devastating. In football terms.
I can imagine, but some up the relief and joy when the run that we finally qualified for Euro 2020. You were talking about crying in Brazil. I remember Ryan Christie crying in an interview after we went through on penalties. How did you feel?
Yeah, so that game, Ryan was crying, and understandably so. And I think he was chatting to my learned colleague Luke Shanley of Sky Sports when he was doing that. And at that time, there were very few media travelling because of COVID. Because that was, obviously kind of not the height of it, but, it was during that period where people weren't travelling and such like. So that game, we did that game in a studio in Pacific Quay, Athateli, which is difficult. And it's difficult for a whole plethora of reasons, which I won't get into. But that was that night. I mean, honestly, I'm a nightmare when it comes to penalty shootouts because my arithmetic's terrible, right? Ask any maths teacher I have ever had back in the day, and I still see one of my old maths teachers, unfortunately. I say unfortunately, he's a nice man. I see him if I'm away covering Rangers games. He's a big Rangers fan. And I've bumped into him a few times. And he's at pains to remind me of my ineptitude when it comes to mathematics and arithmetic. So you're always nervous in penalty shootouts, but that night, honestly, it gave such a seismic moment. I've still got it. Like, I don't upload to social media very often, but that night I took a photograph of my abhorrent handwriting after that shootout, and I put it up on one of the Instagram or something. So it must have been a big moment if I'm posting something on social media. And it really was. I mean, you know, when you think of the fact that it was 2 penalty shootouts got us to that tournament, as well as an excellent Nations League campaign under Alec McLeish, Peter Grant and James McFadden, and Alan McGregor's saves against Israel in that final Nations League game. Because the qualifying campaign for that tournament is one of the worst Scotland have ever produced. Yet they qualified for the finals. And, you know, this is why the Nations League to me is one of the greatest inventions of all time, not just in football. It allowed Scotland to qualify for that tournament. Because that was the campaign started with a 3-0 defeat in Kazakhstan. And there was like pumpings by Russia and Belgium in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
Like Scotland, it was a terrible campaign. But the Nations League, under Alec and the boys, allowed us to get into that playoff. And obviously, Stevie Clark and a lot of the guys who are still in the squad got us over the line. But it was penalties against Israel. You know, Kenny MacLean scored a decisive penalty, and I was devastated for Kenny missing out in that tournament, having played a massive role in the qualification. And then in Belgrade, I mean, it might have been a very different kettle of fish had there been fans in the ground that night, because it's quite an intimidating stadium. I did a game there this season. Celtic were playing a Europa League game against Red Star in there, and it's got that big, massive, you know, tunnel that they force the away team to walk through before you get to the pitch. So it's meant to be quite gladiatorial, and the away team's meant to be kind of scared. They're walking through this tunnel with the graffiti and all this as they make their way to the pitch. So it might have been beneficial for Scotland, and Ryan Christie scored a hell of a goal that night.
Yeah.
But, you know, the heartache that we had to go through, again, the emotion, Stephen, because obviously Serbia equalised in one of the last touches of the ball before, you know, at the end of 90 minutes, you know, and takes the game to extra time. I think it was Luka Jovic scored a goal, I can't remember. Anyway.
Yeah, it was.
I turned into my dad at that point and I said, I don't know if I can do this again.
But the one thing I would say is that commentating in Scotland games is easier than standing there as a fan. Because as a fan, you can turn away. You don't need to look at it. You can turn around, you can moan to your mates, you can say this, you can say that, you can say, oh, that was rubbish or whatever. When you're commentating the game, you've got to be fully focused on it the whole time, regardless of how bad it's going. And trust me, see, over the 15, 16 years I've been doing Scotland games, there's been some amazing moments, but there's been a hell of a lot of dreadful times along the way. But that one, the Belgrade night, even though I'm in a studio in Glasgow, Pacific Quay, the feeling of elation as a Scotland fan, first and foremost, was amazing. It was an amazing night. And the guys who were out there, they had an amazing party. And I think Bacala have been reborn since then as well, haven't they?
Yeah, they certainly were, thanks to a certain Mr. Considine, amongst others, his influence. Had to drop that in somewhere. We won't discuss too much the performance of Scotland at that delayed Euro 2020 finals. We won't actually talk about their on the pitch in Germany in Euro 2024, but Germany was special because it was the first time fans were able to go to a tournament since France 98, and you were obviously there in your capacity as a commentator. But how much did you enjoy being in Germany for those couple of weeks away from the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I love Germany. I mean, I just love Germany anyway. If I get a chance to go to Germany, I always take it. It's a great country. The cities are amazing. And when you saw the cities that Scotland were going to be going to, I'd been to Munich before, and I love Munich. Never been to Cologne, and having been there now, what an experience that was for any Scotland fan that went to Cologne as well. I think they'd probably, anyone who went to all three was fortunate enough to be to all three. John is maybe one of them there. Cologne was probably the highlight. Would that be fair?
100%.
Yeah,
I stayed in Cologne for the full 2 weeks, and it was
Right.
just amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I love Munich. I mean, Munich's just a great place. I've been there socially several times, and I've worked there several times as well, covering like Champions League games and what have you. But you know, that was one of the pinnacles for me, was commentating on the opening match of an international tournament on Scotland against Germany in Germany. I mean, you know, my old university got in touch with me as part of the alumni thing in the build up to that, and asked me to do a little kind of behind the scenes video, just like a selfie video of where I was sitting, and doing a kind of 360 of the stadium, that kind of thing. And I'm glad they did ask me to do that, because I'm not great for documenting things, you know, where I've been. And I used to be quite good at it. I used to be religious when it came to taking photographs of stadiums I was in, and photographs of me being in the stadiums, because I don't ever forget that, you know, I'm in a position, okay, I've worked to get there, but also it's, you know, I feel extremely grateful to be able to go to these amazing stadiums in these amazing countries. I maybe don't document it as much as I should. That's not me being blasé, it's just me being rubbish with my phone and rubbish at doing what the young team do, and, you know, taking photographs of absolutely everything that they do, and whether it's a cup of coffee in Starbucks or whether they're climbing a Monroe or something like that. You know, I'm just not very good at it. But I took this selfie video for my old uni, and I did it in Cologne as well, because they wanted another one. And I'm glad that I did them, because then I actually see that I'm there. And the Allianz is just such a... All the stadiums in Germany are great, but the Allianz is like a spaceship. I mean, it's ridiculous. So no, Germany, being there for 2 weeks was amazing. It was amazing. And you couldn't really wish for a better country to go to when it comes to a major tournament if you're visiting.
Yeah, definitely. I love Germany. I want to go back one day, but we'll wait and see what happens for that. But yeah, you mentioned that you're not great with your social media content, although hopefully we'll see more of that in the summer when you go to Boston, etc. But a lot of people like to do viral content on your behalf, as per the Denmark game with the guys' shipmates, the Australian boys. So you've also just done one of the highlights of your career, that Denmark game, and I'm going to ask you to summarise your emotions that night. With Paddy and Tom in the commentary box, because your commentaries, all three, was iconic from that game. But what did you make of the social media content that was going out about afterwards, including that video, that the lip syncing of your commentaries I just mentioned?
Well, firstly, when I listen back to myself, I hate it. I mean, not anyone. I don't know anyone who enjoys listening back to themselves. I mean, I've deliberately gone back and listened to stuff that I've done to try and learn from it, learn from the mistakes. And I absolutely love, for anyone that knows me will know this, I absolutely love my anonymity. I love the fact that I love the job I do, but I love the fact that I can walk around a city centre, whether that's Glasgow, Edinburgh, or Aberdeen, nobody knows who I am, with my kids. You know, love that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I'm very uncomfortable when it comes to, and I understand it's an occupational hazard, but I'm very uncomfortable with any kind of recognition of what you're kind of referring to there. You know, which sounds bizarre, because I've always wanted to work in the media and present and broadcast, all this kind of stuff. But I think I've just seen the way that people that I've worked with in the past have been dealt with by the football public. And I'm not talking about the public, I'm talking about the football public, because a lot of people can get the kind of dog's abuse that, you know, that there's no way they should be getting that kind of stuff thrown at them.
Agreed.
And I am, and you know, in football, I understand it's partisan, and you know, it's, you know, you've got this kind of tribal element to it, and I get that because I support a football team, and whether it's international level or club level, you're going to have that tribalism, and I like that. I don't think that's, as long as it doesn't cross a line. But no, I love the anonymity. So when I saw all the stuff, people were texting me all this. I mean, after the Denmark game, I'd a flight to London the very next day. Family trip. So it was Christmas, the Christmas winter wonderland. They just opened at Hyde Park. So we're away down there doing all that kind of stuff and blah, blah, blah. But I was asked to go on a few things, which I graciously turned down because I don't. It's not about me, It's not about me. It's about the team and what they achieved and what it meant to the country. So I don't want to put myself at the front of that, and that's just not my style anyway. But when I look back at the commentary, having heard it back once or twice since then, including the viral video you were talking about, because I think I got that from about 50 different folk. The thing that made that was Tomo. Tomo that night. Honestly, obviously, there were a few different things there. So when McTominay scored his goal, Tomo's wetting himself laughing in the background. You can hear it. Faddy as well. Tomo's just laughing. I think he said something about, what was that? And then he said something along the lines that Michael Jordan couldn't get up as high as that. Something along those lines. And then obviously when his good mate Kenny scores from the halfway line, and they're obviously big pals, the two of them, Kenny hits it. Just before he hits it, he starts going, shoot, all that kind of stuff. And he knew immediately that it was going in. Because he starts going, he's done him. And that made it. That for me is, take myself out of it. That to me is Scotland qualifying for World Cup for the first time in nearly 30 years. It's hearing that. And it was an amazing thing and totally organic as well. Do you know what I mean? Like when I listen back to what I said, if someone had said to me that Kieran Tierney was going to score, it's going to be 2-2, it's going to be to and fro, ebbs and flow, blah, blah, blah. And Kieran Tierney was going to score in the whatever minute it was, 92nd minute, whatever. And Kenny MacLean's going to score from the halfway line just after that. I would have 100% come up with something better to say than what I came out with. Because what I came out with, whilst it's fine and it's in the moment, I would 100% say different stuff if other things, different things, if I'd had my time again. But it's hindsight. Do you know what I mean? You can't, nobody could have envisaged that happening. But for me, there's, when it comes to Scotland, certainly, I'll be doing well to top that. I think even if Scotland qualify out of the groups at the World Cup, you'd be struggling to top that, unless it's by beating Brazil 3-0, which is unlikely. That might top it. But I just can't see anything. Can't see Scotland doing anything in however long I end up doing this. It might be another 20 years, it might be 20 days, I don't know. Well, better not be 20 days because that's the World Cup's after that. But, do you know what? You take my point. 20 years, 20 months, whatever. I just can't imagine doing anything as big and dramatic and as an amazing as that was.
Yeah, I think that is going to be a hard one for you to top. It's just saying unless Scotland get a last-minute winner against Brazil or even go further, but we'll just need to wait and see how that goes. But what does it mean to you getting the chance to be to go to the World Cup as BBC's main commentator, following those guys that I mentioned before at the start?
Yeah, it's pretty humbling, to be honest with you, with the word that I would use to describe it. I'm down to do 2 live Scotland games, and there's a few others out, non-Scotland games I'm down to do. So, the bottom line is, when I started doing this 20 odd year ago, the goal, I guess, was a World Cup. And the opportunity was always reliant on Scotland qualifying. So that's happened. I'm going to get the chance, and it'll be hopefully an amazing experience. And great. It's obviously it's a big ambition to be able to do it, and I'm looking forward to it. There'll be the usual kind of adrenaline and nerves and everything that goes with it. Let's see if we can get through this tournament without anything going viral, eh?
Good luck with that.
I hope you're wrong there, because I hope we won it and you're everywhere.
Well, that would mean that I will miss the flight for my summer holiday, Stephen. So maybe that'll be a good thing. Although I'm not sure others would agree.
Yeah, you might get another Celine Dion moment out of this. You just never know. Your friends, Hampden Roar host and fellow commentator Andy Barge, he's written a book called A Long Time Coming, detailing the campaign that's just gone by. He's actually coming on this podcast next week as well. How excited are you for him to have this book?
Well, he's very excited just now, but not as excited as the fact that he's on his honeymoon right now as we record this. Yeah. Having spoken to him yesterday, I had a wee chat with him about the book a few months ago. A real kind of labour of love for him. He's a massive Scotland fan. He gets to see it occasionally from my viewpoint when it comes to doing the commentaries and stuff. He does the World Feed commentary, which is a very important feed, because that's where any English-speaking countries will get the World Feed commentary. And he's done well to get as many of the guys sat down to chat with him as he's managed to do. So, great opportunity for him to build in his previous book, I would suggest.
Yeah, we certainly wish him all the best. So, Stephen has a couple more questions to wrap things up.
Oh, but you touched earlier on, I think it was before Italian 90, that the form maybe wasn't great going into that tournament where you beat off of Egypt. Obviously, the form going into this one isn't exactly great either. So, having said that, what chance do you give Scotland of reaching the last 32?
Going to be tough. I mean, it genuinely comes down to the Haiti game. I've gone through a lot of simulators in the last few weeks. The thing is, the problem I've got is it's extremely busy into the domestic season. So I've been trying to do bits and bobs on the World Cup where I can, because after the Scottish Cup final, it's kind of pretty much into it. So I've been doing bits and bobs, been looking at some simulators, and it looks, 4 points will absolutely take you through to the next round. 3 points will take you through, but your goal difference can't really be worse than -2. So you've got to be looking at beating Haiti, and you've got to be looking at getting out of the other two games at the very least with a goal difference of -2. It might be that -2 is not going to be enough, because actually there's a lot of teams when you look at the other groups, there's a lot of teams, kind of third pot teams, who might be able to stick a good few goals past the bottom seeds, which means Scotland have to be looking at 4 points. Let's target 4 points. The problem is, Haiti have got a couple of really good English Premier League players in the forward areas of the pitch. That is not going to be a walkover by any stretch. And as John will tell you, that's got Costa Rica written all over it. The other games, Morocco, I checked this, and I'm not even joking. Today, as we record this, I checked, and I was looking at the Morocco results since they got knocked out of the semis at the World Cup last time. They lost to Croatia in the third place playoff. So from that moment to now, they've lost 2 games of football, not including the Africa Cup of Nations final, which they've since been awarded. So if you want to include that, and they've been awarded the title, albeit Senegal have gone to the Court of Arbitration for Sport since. So that might flip back again. But as it stands, they've lost 2 games to South Africa in Africa Cup of Nations qualifying and in the previous Africa Cup of Nations tournament. And that's the only 2 games they've lost, out with that final, which they've since been awarded. Morocco are going to be a massive tough nut to crack, maybe even a tougher nut to crack than Brazil.
And I can completely see that logic. I think you wait so long to get here, and we've been handed a group that again is daunting. But surely.
But Stephen, see, to be honest, right? Sorry to interrupt here, right? See, to be honest, and maybe I'm just saying this because it's been so long, and I saw Scotland qualify for tournaments before, and I've never seen Scotland. No one's ever seen Scotland qualify from a group stage at a major tournament. See Scotland qualifying for a major event, and I'm there to be shot at with this. I don't, this is just my opinion. I think Scotland qualifying is good enough.
Yeah.
See if they go on and they do something at a tournament, great. I will not hold a manager of Scotland to account by what happens at a major tournament. And I know Steve Clarke had his critics after Germany, and I can understand that because I think we were really poor. But see, getting to these tournaments for Scotland, I think that's a win. However, the flip side to that is you see what the likes of Croatia can do with a similar population, getting to World Cup, the latter stages of World Cups that they've done for the last couple of tournaments. Do you know what I mean? There's 2 sides to it. But I'm personally content with Scotland qualifying, and anything they do beyond that's a bonus, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think just getting to a World Cup, when I've said I've not seen one, can't remember one. This is good enough. But we've got some questions now from some of the regular appearers on the podcast. Do you mind if I just run through them?
Absolutely not. Let's have it. Any slagging?
No. Well,
all right. Okay. I'll tell
no.
Hit me with them.
So Charlie asks, and I'll run through because he's kind of been giving you 4 subjects to go through here, right? So I'll name the 4, and then if you need reminded of them when you're answering, I can do that. Favourite game you've commented on, club game and country. The hardest player name you've had to pronounce, your favourite stadium to do commentary, and your favourite pie. So if you need reminded of any of them at any point, I can do that.
Okay, right. Favourite games, is that the first one?
Yeah, club
or country.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to say the Denmark game for obvious reasons. If it wasn't the Denmark game, it would probably be... is it safe to say Aberdeen's Scottish Cup final last year as well? It's pretty mental, actually, when you think Aberdeen won the Scottish Cup and Scotland qualify for the World Cup in the same year.
Yeah, just retired in 2025.
I know, it's true. Should have disappeared in a puff of smoke and then everyone would be happy. Denmark, definitely. I mean, Denmark was just, as a game, as a spectacle, for what it meant, the size of it, it's got to be Denmark, innit? Do you know what I mean? It's got to be.
Yeah. And the hardest player name you've had to pronounce?
Probably, I mean, it seems a little bit kind of current to say Kvica Kvaratskhelia, but that is a difficult one. So probably Kvaratskhelia, I would say. The Georgia PSG winner. Fabulous player, by the way.
Favourite stadium to do commentary?
See, I would say Pataudry, but the pillar gets in the way, so that kind of takes Pataudry out of it. It's ridiculous the standard of stadiums that I've worked in down the years, and the ones that we've got in America, I've never been in them, but we'll wait and see what they're like. But the one that kind of always stands out to me is the Juventus Stadium, the new one that they moved into after the Del Alpi was demolished. It's amazing. But see, to be honest, the Metropolitano in Madrid, when I've only been to the Bernabeu once, and it was a building site at the time, so I can't really count that. I was in the new camp, but the problem with the new camp was the commentary position was away over behind the corner flag. So you're away in the corner of the stadium. I don't know what it's going to be like after it's refurbished, or now that it has been refurbished. But the Atletico Madrid Stadium, the Metropolitano, is amazing. Not as iconic as the Calderon, which is where they played before, which is where I did my first ever live TV game, to go back to what we were talking about earlier on. But for atmosphere, the Juve Stadium, it's only like capacity is like 40, 45, 50,000 or something like that. It's not a massive stadium. But the atmosphere was amazing. And every time they scored a goal, they played just like 4 bars of Chelsea Dagger by the Fratellis at the loudest volume you can hear. And it just echoed up into the Turin sky afterwards. Phenomenal. But I'll say that, like, I've been to the Deluge in Lisbon, astonishing stadium as well. The Zenit St. Petersburg Stadium, the Luzhniki in Moscow. It's the Allianz in Munich. It's just, honestly, I could go on. I mean, it's just been a privilege of my life to be able to work in these stadiums.
And then finally, your favourite pie.
My favourite pie. I would say that my favourite pies recently have been at St Mirren, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention Pie Sports on here. And I know that they go to 1 or 2 other stadiums. I'm not sure. Did they go to Falkirk as well? Can't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had a Pie Sports.
Sponsor us.
Do that. That's a great idea. Pie Sports pies, the best Scottish football pies. They did one. It was like a salt and chili chicken pie, and honestly, I bit into it, and it was like I'd gone to heaven or something.
I love
Like this thing. Honestly, you bit into it, and it was a taste sensation. Like the it didn't matter. The chicken, the sauce was kind of dribbling down your chin and all that. It didn't matter. You were just in the moment. It was beautiful. So if you're at a game at St Mirren, or maybe I think it's Falkirk, I have to double check. If you see Pie Sports signs, get yourself into that game. Pay for your match ticket. It's worth it to pay a $5 for the pie.
Completely agree. The Pie Sports fun. So if they want to sponsor it, please feel free.
Pie Sports, do it.
Grant is a North East man like yourself, and he's asked, what is the best town or village outside of Aberdeen City?
Oh, that's an easy one. It's Dice.
That's because it's yours, isn't it? That's why you're saying
that's right. It is God's country. That is God's country, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Well, he might say Ellen.
Ellen's nice, but it's nae Dice.
I love the fact that you bring that there. He's also asked if you're a fan of deep fried Mars bars, with them being a Northeast delicacy.
Disgusting. Deep fried Snickers, yes.
Snickers?
No, I don't like Mars bars.
No,
I don't like Mars bars.
I can't be dealing with Snickers.
Snickers, aye.
Dave, he's asked, what is your pre-match song before covering the Scotland game at Hampden? Do you listen to anything on the way to the game to get you hyped up?
No, really. Nothing Scotland related. Like, it's probably like Baba O'Reilly by The Who, or Slide Away by Oasis, or something like that. It won't be anything that he's hoping I'm saying. He's probably hoping I'm saying We'll Be Coming or something like that. It's not that, unfortunately. Or Loch Lomond, but that is a good tune. And it always worked well back. See that Euro 2008 campaign? I remember, I mean, the atmosphere's great now, but I remember them playing like Loch Lomond at half-time just before the teams were coming
the
out.
Flags, just all the
Just,
flags.
amazing. So good. So good.
Oh, you kind of wonder why that's disappeared from Hampden, don't you? I used to see flags everywhere.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, you don't see much of that these days. It was just salt tires everywhere, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And speaking about Hampden, actually, what is so special about being at Hampden covering in Scotland? Why is that stadium so special?
The funny thing is, like, a lot of people would say it isn't anymore. But I don't think you can deny, when you think of some of the big Scotland games and cup finals, but in particular Scotland games over the course of the time since it was redeveloped. You think of the matches against the French and the Italians for that Euro 2008 tournament. Even before that, there were games against Germany and Italy. Remember Kenny Miller scoring in those games. More recently, the Griffiths free kicks against England, albeit, the great, brilliant moments, but ruined, soiled by what happened just after that. If only Stuart Armstrong had kicked the ball into the North Stand like everyone else thought he should.
When that goal went in, I was that nervous because it's just a dream of mine to see Scotland beat England, right? I went down the ramp to where the disabled toilets are because I just couldn't watch the game at that point. And I heard the roar as if Scotland were on the counter-attack. And see, by the time I got to the top of the ramp, Harry Kane had put the ball in the net. What's happened there? Genuinely, just think about this then. Harry Kane scores in the last minute, and that came 3 weeks after Tom Rogic had scored the last minute winner in the Scottish Cup final against the Dons. Well, it's balanced out.
Liam, that's not allowed in this podcast.
I can totally understand why, John. I can understand why. But no, look, Hampden to me is a very special venue. Always has been. It was the place you went to if you were successful or if you were following the national team. A really important place, whether it's the current guise of the stadium or the old terraces when you took your life in your own hands, just by standing watching a football match. If you weren't in front of one of the fences, it was a trepidatious place to be. But we've had some lows there, obviously, but some amazing highs, and none more so than last November. And it's a result that will have repercussions into the summer, thankfully.
Yeah, the 18th of November, that's a night that's always going to be remembered for years and years to come. So final question from me, and I've prepared you for this. Name a best Scotland 11 from your lifetime.
Oh, yes, I need to think. Now, I took a couple of notes about this earlier. So this was tough, by the way.
Yeah.
I found this quite difficult. But given he got a little bit of criticism earlier in the podcast, I'm going to put Jim Leighton in goal. Jim he's a brilliant guy first and foremost, but a magnificent goalkeeper who has come in for, in my opinion, unfair criticism. I think a lot of that's come from with Scotland, his battle with Andy Gorham. I think a lot of people felt it was, Gorham should have had more caps than he should have done. And obviously Gorham was a magnificent goalkeeper as well. But I think it came from that FA Cup final with Manchester United against Crystal Palace, where he got dumped after the 3-3 draw. United won the replay, but I'd go Leighton all day long. I remember him playing at Italia 90, and before that, actually, he was actually beaten ridiculously by that Norway goal in the qualifier that sealed Scotland's place at the World Cup in 1990, which was actually a worse goal conceding the one he conceded against Brazil, in my opinion, at the tournament. But you'll remember his performance against Sweden. I think he was at Hibs at the time.
Mm-hmm.
For was that the 98 qualifiers?
Yeah.
It was France qualifiers. Mm-hmm. At Ibrox against Sweden, Scotland won 1-0 and John McGinley scored the only goal, and Leighton was just a one-man barricade that night. It was one of the great Scotland international goalkeeping performances. And just the fact he's played so many tournaments, such a successful goalkeeper, I'm going to put Leighton in goal.
What's your formation?
Can I go 4-3-3? Is that allowed?
Yep.
You're the manager.
When was the last time Scotland played 4-3-3? But anyway, I'm going to do that. And you've asked me to put a Scotland team from kind of my life together, but I'm kind of talking about a Scotland team that I watched in my life, rather than, because I can't be putting Danny McGrain and Kenny Dalglish in because they were just before me.
Yeah.
Do
you know what I mean?
I get that.
So anyway, do you want me to just list them, or are you going to go through it one position by position, or do you just want me to do it?
You just do it.
Okay, right. I think right back has been a problem, and I think Aaron Hickey's got an amazing chance to go on and be a real proper Scotland legend and be one of the best right backs this country's produced. Hopefully he shrugs off the injury problems. But right back, I've decided to go for Stuart McKimmie. And this isn't an Aberdeen thing before anyone starts that. I've got serious nods to Alan Hutton and Graham Alexander and these guys. But I think right back's always been, for whatever reason, it's always been a kind of problem position for Scotland down the years. McKimmie played, he was in the Italian United squad, but he played obviously at a time where Scotland were qualifying for tournaments regularly. Fantastic club career. So I'm going to say McKimmie at right back. Centre backs, again, it seems ridiculous not to put Willie in here, because Willie, I saw the tail end of Willie's international career, and I mentioned that game against Norway earlier, which ended his football career. But I only saw the kind of tail end of Willie's international career. So I'll put McLeish in. So Mona McLeish playing for Scotland. So I'll put Big Alec in alongside Colin Hendry, which again, Hendry was, I mean, he's the kind of figurehead of 90s Scottish international football, isn't he? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say Hendry and McLeish is the centre-back pairing. I'll put Andy Robertson at left-back. Mm-hmm. He's going to be the record caps holder within 6-7 months. So put Robbo in at left-back. Midfield 3, I'm going to put John McGinn in there with McTominay, obvious reasons. And it says it all about those three, Robertson, McGinn, McTominay, that they would go into this team. Yeah. Because they're the only three of the current squad that I'm putting in this team from my lifetime. And yet this is a team that's qualified for 3 out of 4 major tournaments. So McGinn, McTominay, I mean, what more needs to be said about these guys? I think they've contributed to 45 goals in total, whether they've scored them themselves or set them up under Steve Clarke. They're legends, and they've got a chance to be even bigger legends in the States this summer. Now, the third midfielder I'm kind of struggling with, and it's between two for this place. It's either Gary McAllister or John Collins. Now, I'm edging more towards Collins because he gave me that moment in 98 with the picture going up in the air and all that when he scored that penalty against Brazil. Gary McAllister was such a wonderful midfield player who, you know, he won more than Collins in his career. And in my opinion, the ending of his international career was quite tragic in many ways. Because obviously it stemmed from what happened at Wembley with that penalty that Yuri Geller moved the ball with. Apparently. Yuri Geller should have been the scapegoat for that, not Gary McAllister. But anyway, I'll probably go Collins for the simple reason he was a fabulous player, obviously. And he scored that penalty against Brazil that gave me one of my best moments, if not my best moment as a Scotland fan, because I've seen a few players score for Scotland at World Cup finals. I've seen Stuart McCall do it. I've seen John Collins do it. I've seen Craig Burley do it. But that moment there, as an 18-year-old on the big screen in a student union watching Scotland score in the opening match of World Cup, doesn't get much better than that, does it? So I put Collins in ahead of McAllister. But obviously there's other people you can mention down the years who are excellent midfielders. I mentioned Jim Bett was one of my heroes as a kid. Paul McStay, Roy Aitken. You go back to, I don't know, like Davy Cooper playing more of a forward, fantastic footballer. Gordon Strachan. Strachan came back in the early 90s. You'll remember John came back when he was, I think he was like 39, 40 when he played for Scotland in the 90s. But no, I'll go with Collins, with McGinn and McTominay. And up front three, and Faddy's got to be in there, isn't he?
Love that you've given him a shout.
Well, I'm working with him for a month in June, so I've got to mention him. So we'll go Faddy. We'll go McCoist. And I was swithering about this one. I thought Kevin Gallagher, because, again, some really important goals, particularly on the road to France.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pick Kenny Miller up there, because Kenny has got... I always thought Kenny did a brilliant job for Scotland.
He did.
He scored some really important goals against big teams as well. And I just think Kenny always gave us all for the national team. He's passionate about playing for Scotland. I know that, having worked with him since. So I'll go Kenny, but yeah, like, obviously there are many others who could have been in there, but that would be in my lifetime, I'd say Scotland 11. But just on the record again, tough one to leave Willie Miller out, given he would have been seamlessly in beside Big Alec.
Yeah, that's a controversial call in some ways. But then, as you say, Willie Miller did his knee in that game against Norway. I never got to see him play for Scotland. The only time I saw Willie Miller play in the flesh was Queen's Park, Aberdeen in 1990, his last game.
It was his last game. In fact, that was his one and only comeback game after being injured against Norway. So his last two games were at Hampden.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Norway game and the Queen's Park game the following season in the League Cup.
Yeah. Fitting that his final game should be at Hampden, but not a trophy, unfortunately, for him. Well, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast, Liam, to share your thoughts ahead of the World Cup, and have a great time in America. Be interested to see who foots most of the beer bill. Your Faddy.
It'll be James, definitely James.
Yeah. Stephen, thanks for helping out tonight, and keep your eye out for more World Cup content from SFF Podcast as we build up to the big event. And thank you all for listening to this episode. Bye for now.